Stories written by Jamie Rex. Audiobooks narrated by Samuel Dudley, aka Uncle Mammy. Story 6: The Well. Granny and Grandpa Hawley lived in a beautiful cottage in Devon called Wells Deep. Granny Hawley spent most of her days in the garden, tending the flower beds and picking the raspberries and blackcurrants that grew in abundance up the wall behind the compost heap. Grandpa Hawley had bought himself a garden buggy. He would spend his days driving around trimming the lawn and stopping occasionally to do battle with an enormous weed. In the center of the garden there was an old well from which the cottage's name had derived. According to parish records, the well had been there for over 1,100 years. If you dropped the stone in at the top, it would fall for 26 seconds before it hit the water. The well was very deep. Granny and Grandpa Hawley had 2 grandchildren, Louis and Ben. Ben was the oldest, but not by much. They were not particularly naughty children, but they did like sticking their fingers into things that ought not to have little fingers stuck in them. Let's face it, they were ordinary kids. Inquisitive, clumsy, obstinate, and above all, fearlessly attracted to water, like mice to a mousetrap. Granny Hawley pushed the sun hat off her eyes and rested her hands on her broad, aching hips. "Kiwi!" she shouted. "Grandpa!" Grandpa Hawley chugged up on his buggy. "Yes, my dear," he said, knocking the tobacco out of his pipe onto her begonias. "I do wish you wouldn't do that, John," she said. "Sorry, oh dear. What did you want me for?" "The well," said Granny Hawley. "The grandchildren arrive tomorrow, and you have promised to block it up." "Have I?" said Grandpa Hawley. "You know you have," said his wife. "Now run along and do it. We don't want Louis and Ben falling down the well on the first morning, now do we?" "Couldn't it wait?" "No," said Granny Hawley emphatically. "Now, I'll tell you what I'll do," said Grandpa Hawley, putting on his "I am thinking deeply" face. "First thing tomorrow morning, I'll go down to the shops and buy a plank of wood and some nails. I'll have the whole thing finished by lunchtime." "It would be simpler if you just did it now," insisted Granny Hawley. "Not tonight, my dear. I haven't finished the mowing. Tomorrow morning's best." "Very well," said his wife, picking up her shovel. "If you promise." "That's the spirit," said Grandpa Hawley, as he poddled off again on his buggy. "Tomorrow morning, you'll see." Next morning, Grandpa Hawley had a lie-in. Once he had finished his breakfast in bed, consisting of 3 boiled eggs, a jug of orange juice, several cups of black coffee, and a plate of Marmite soldiers, it was time for his bath. A ritual, hour-long soak listening to Gardener's Question Time on Radio 4. Then he shaved, brushed his hair, straightened his tie, and went downstairs. It was 12:15. Granny Hawley was waiting for him. Her lips were ever so slightly pinched, and she was affecting an air of general business, although she actually had nothing to do. "And what about the well?" she said brusquely. Grandpa Hawley looked surprised. "The well?" "The well," she repeated, "which you were going to board up this morning." "Good heavens, no, oh dear. I said I'd do that this afternoon." "No, you didn't," said his wife. "Didn't I?" said Grandpa Hawley innocently. "This afternoon," she continued, "the children arrived. There will not be time to do it this afternoon." "Oh, what a shame," he said. "Well, I'll just have to do it tomorrow morning." And off he went to sharpen his blades on his roller mower. Louis and Ben arrived at 3 o'clock with their parents. 3:05, their parents left. They were late, and just had 2 hours to catch their plane to Venice. The children stood in the hall, clutching their suitcases.
Well,
said Granny Holly.
isn't this nice? Let's go and see Grandpa in the garden.
Grandpa was asleep in his potting shed. He was trying to sneak 40 winks while his wife wasn't watching.
Hello, Grandpa,
said Ben. Grandpa woke with a start and upset the bottle of beer which he had hidden in his jumper.
Good heavens, there you are. I've been waiting out here for hours for you two to arrive.
You're asleep,
said Lewis.
No, he snorted. Just getting my eyelid to rest. Now come along and let's go and explore.
Granny Holly put her hand up to stop them.
One more thing before you go, children, she said. Don't go near the well. Your grandfather will be putting it up tomorrow morning, but in the meantime, it's not safe. Do you understand?
Lewis and Ben nodded seriously. Then Granny Holly left to worry about dinner. That night, Grandpa Holly couldn't sleep. Every time he tried to snuggle down, something tickled his feet. Every time he tried to close his eyes, a little hand tugged them open again. Then he heard laughter. Childish laughter coming from underneath his bed. He thought it was his grandchildren, but when he took a look under the bed, there was nothing there. Except the potty, of course.
How very strange, he thought to himself. Good Lord, there it is again!
The laughter was more distant now. It was coming from outside in the garden. He crawled out of bed and went over to the window. The curtain was slightly open, and through the gap he could see the well. Unless his old ears were playing tricks on him, it was the well that was laughing. The well was laughing at him!
Just because I haven't had time to board you over,
thought Grandpa Holly crossly.
He shook his fist at the well and shouted, I'll show you! Tomorrow morning you'll see!
Granny Holly sat up in bed and got quite a shock.
What on earth do you think you're doing, John? Just having a couple of words with the well, dear,
said an embarrassed Grandpa Holly.
Well, come back to bed,
scolded his wife.
You look ridiculous.
Which he did.
You don't know you've forgotten to put your pajamas on, don't you?
Grandpa Holly looked down and sprang back into bed like a naked gazelle. Tomorrow morning arrived. At 9 o'clock precisely, Grandpa Holly marched out of his potting shed carrying a tape measure, a pencil, and the look of an extremely busy man. He reached the well at 2 minutes past 9 and proceeded to walk around it several times, stroking his chin and shaking his head wisely. Then he unwung his tape measure and lay it across the opening to the well. As he bent down to read it, the measure rolled up, backflipped off the edge of the well, and disappeared into the water 50 meters below. Grandpa Holly stood absolutely still. Then he screamed with rage, tore off his hat, and hurled it down the well after the tape measure. Lewis and Ben watched this from the bedroom window and decided he had just gone mad.
It can't be done, said Grandpa Holly to his wife. Not until tomorrow, at least. This job needs specialist equipment. You know, hammer, saw...
He couldn't think of anything else. I need more time to plan.
Yes, dear,
replied Granny Holly, who knew from experience that there was no point in arguing with him when he was in this kind of mood, even though she knew he was wrong. After lunch, Grandpa Holly had a sleep, well earned in his opinion, while Granny Holly dead-headed a few roses. Lewis and Ben were playing hide-and-seek by the raspberry canes when Lewis spotted a wooden bucket.
Let's play pirates,
he yelled, running across the lawn and jumping inside it.
I'm Lookout.
And I be Long John Silver, said Ben, closing one eye and hopping around on his left leg.
Land ahoy,
bellowed Lewis, rocking backwards and forwards in the bucket as if caught in the eye of a fierce storm. He was getting quite carried away in his crow's nest. He grabbed the rope that was hanging by his side and threw it to Ben.
Ha ha! Heave ho, me hearty matey!
He ordered. Right-ho, Captain, said Ben, taking the rope and giving it a tug. The bucket slid across the lawn and lifted off the ground. Lewis squealed with both terror and delight. He was flying. Granny Holly daped her hot head with a handkerchief. She heard the boys' shriek of uncontrolled excitement and glanced across at them. Her heart stopped. The hairs on the back of her neck shut up. Her fingertips turned icy cold.
Ben!
Benjamin! She shouted. She was up and running. Benjamin, stop! Lewis was not in a crow's nest. He was sitting in the water bucket. The water bucket was attached to the rope which Benjamin was holding, and the rope ran through a shiny black pulley which was bolted onto a block of wood right over the center of the well. Lewis was pointing out to sea, unaware of the huge drop into the water beneath him. Ben was pretending to see land too. He let go of the rope to shade his eyes. Lewis screamed as the bucket slipped downwards and then suddenly jammed to a halt again. Granny Harley sat on the lawn crying, the rope held firmly between her two shaking hands. Grandpa Harley was waking with a bucket of cold water in his face.
You lazy, good-for-nothing old bag of bones! She ranted. They could have been killed! Stop putting off till tomorrow what you should be doing today! Find some wood and fix the well!
Point taken, said Grandpa, looking at his wife's ashen face. Tomorrow morning, I'll be there, just to see if I'm not. Then he lay back down, closed his eyes, and dreamed of 1,000 new excuses for not blocking up the well. There was a full moon that night. Once again, Grandpa Harley could not sleep. Once again, he was prodded from his slumbers by little tickling fingers. Once again, he heard the distant childish laughter which floated up from the well and crept into his bedroom through the open window. He got up to investigate. The well was bathed in an eerie half-light and stood glowing in the middle of the garden. At first, this was all Grandpa Harley could see, but gradually, as his eyes adjusted, he could make out a tiny figure emerging from the back of the cottage and running across the lawn. He rubbed his eyes, thinking the light was playing a trick on them. But the figure did not disappear. Its image grew stronger until Grandpa Harley was convinced that he could see, standing on the edge of the well, a small child.
Benjamin?
Whispered Grandpa Harley. Lewis? Child held out his hand to Grandpa Harley, then toppled backwards and silently fell in. Grandpa Harley dashed down the stairs and ran down to the well, expecting to find a boy. There was none. He flashed a torch down into the dark depths, but all he could see was the glinting water. He leant out over the black hole and called out, but only his voice replied. Then he heard a laugh behind him and felt a tiny hand press into the small of his back. Before he could turn around, he had lost his balance. He scraped his face as he fell. He pushed his arms and leg against the brick walls, but he could not stop himself from sliding 50 meters into the cold, slimy water below. The shock of hitting the water brought him round. He shouted for help as his hands fumbled to gain a hold on the shiny walls. Fortunately, there was a ledge just above his head, and he managed to pull himself up to safety. He spat out a mouthful of brackish water and called out again.
I'll help,
said a small voice underneath the water. Grandpa Harley's eyes nearly dropped out of their sockets as a small boy with a face like a blueberry rose up out of the water and settled down on the ledge next to him.
You should have nailed some wood over the top,
he said. Who are you? Said Grandpa Harley.
I am the ghost of jobs left undone,
said the boy. The ghost of what? Spluttered Grandpa Harley.
Jobs left undone,
repeated the boy.
If you had blocked in this well when you were meant to, none of this would have ever happened.
But I was going to do it tomorrow.
That's what my grandfather kept saying, said the boy. But he never did. That's why I fell to my death down this well.
Grandpa! Two little voices bounced down the walls. Grandpa Harley looked up. He could just make out the dressing gown figures of Lewis and Ben leaning over the top of the well. We've come to save you, announced Ben. We heard you shouting. Stay where you are, replied Grandpa. On no account move. It's too dangerous.
It's all right,
responded Lewis cheerfully.
We know what to do.
Then Lewis and Ben got into the bucket, held on to the rope, and slowly inched their way into the well. No!
roared Grandpa. "The rope won't take the weight!" But it was too late. The rope snapped, and Lewis and Ben fell like rocks towards the water. "No!" shouted Grandpa, sitting up in bed.
What is it?
said Granny Holly.
Nothing, he lied. Just a dream.
Then he lay down in his soaking wet pajamas and tried to get back to sleep. The next day, the well was boarded up before Lewis and Ben had even got out of bed. Grandpa Holly was taking no more chances.
Well done,
said Granny Holly, admiring his clumsy handiwork.
and about time too.
Grandpa Holly looked sheepish and picked a nail out from in between his teeth.
Well, now that you've done that job, she added, you can paint the outside of the house. You've been meaning to do that for ages. Tomorrow,
said Grandpa Holly.
I'll do it tomorrow.